sometimes people who have close contact with these minority groups, they think different as someone who know minorities only from media.
Rainer, welcome back to Informed Choice Radio. It's delightful as always to have you on the show. We're talking today about one of your new books, The Rich in Public Opinion, and this is a subject that hasn't been well researched in the past, I think it's fair to say.
Yes, absolutely. There are so many, I think thousands of books or scientific articles in scientific journals about prejudice against Black people, against gay people, against women, against Jewish people, and so on. But there was almost nothing about prejudice against rich people. And so I felt that it's important to have a scientific study about this, because we see all over the world more and more hate against rich people. Some month ago, maybe you heard it, for example, in the United States, they placed a guillotine in front of the house of Jeff Bezos. And you can find a lot of T-shirts even in the internet with "kill the rich" or with a guillotine or something like this. And we had here protesters in Berlin with posters like "kill your landlord," for example. And if I saw slogans like this, I thought about this: what would be the reaction if someone would have posters with, for example, "kill Muslims" or "kill Black people"? I think everybody would be rightly outraged or shocked about this. But with killing rich people or killing landlords, everything seems to be okay. Or placing a guillotine in front of the house of rich people. And so I thought that it's an important topic. And then I looked, there's so much prejudice research, especially in the United States, but I found almost nothing about rich people. And so this is the first study about this topic.
And in those examples you give there, that's not just stereotypes at a low level. It's not just a bit of mild hatred. That's serious. That could lead to loss of life. That could lead to real violence. And there's been examples of that, haven't there, during the 21st century, 20th century?
Yes, this is what people forget sometimes. If I discuss the topic with people, sometimes they tell me, "Oh, rich people, they have a good life. They shouldn't be so sensitive about any." Maybe there is prejudice, maybe there are stereotypes, but they have a good life. And sure, of course, it's right. Rich people have a good life. This is the reason why so many people want to become rich. But on the other hand, please don't forget that words can become deeds. We had so many examples in the 20th century. For example, if you think about the so-called kulaks in Ukraine or Russia, where hundreds of thousands of wealthy peasants were killed at this time. Or we had the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and we had the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And there were so many cases when rich people were deported or even murdered. And we had it here in Germany in the 70s. We had this left-wing terrorist from the so-called Red Army faction, and they killed CEOs of German banks or of employers federation and so on. So I tell people always, don't forget that words can become deeds.
How have you approached your research in this book? Because I know the book is split into several different parts. And for me, the really fascinating part is this research that you've conducted using, I believe, Ipsos Mori and other polling organizations. So how did you approach that?
Yes, you're right. The book has three parts. The first part is about prejudice research in general and what we can learn from this research about rich people. There's, for example, the so-called stereotype content model and other results from prejudice research. And I looked what can we transform for rich people. And the third part of the book is how the rich are portrayed in media. But it's correct? You mentioned the second part, and these are the results of the first international poll. And I commissioned Ipsos Mori, and they conducted a poll in United States, UK, France, and Germany. And now, because the book will be published as well in Italy and Spain, we had, after publishing the book, new results. I can tell you a little bit about the results from Italy as well, and the results from Spain I will get in the next few weeks. So it's an international project, the first one, because there were some polls in this countries with some questions about rich people, but you can compare it only when you have exactly the same questions in all the countries, and and not only 2 or 3 questions, but we had dozens of questions and statements for our interviewees. And so this was a possibility to compare the attitude towards rich people in all these countries.
And were you surprised to see differences in attitudes towards rich people between, say, the United States and Germany, or the United Kingdom and France? Were there significant differences?
Yeah, sure, I expected differences, but in spite of this, there were some very interesting results and some surprise as well. Maybe I give some examples for our questions. It's already as well about envy, social envy, and the problem is you can't measure envy with direct questions. For example, if you ask someone whether he's envious or not, almost everyone will tell you, no, I'm not envious. And so we know it from envy research. I didn't know it before. There are a lot of books about research about envy, psychological research. And so you have to find ways to measure it in an indirect way. And I think social envious, as I understand it, they are not primarily motivated by the desire to improve their own situation, to close the gap between them and the rich. If we speak about envy, social envy, it's very important that social envious are not primarily motivated by the desire to improve their own situation, to close the gap between them and the rich, but to make life worse for rich people, even if they have no advantage for themselves. I give you an example that it's not so abstract. Maybe we had, for example, this one question. I think it would be fair to increase taxes substantially for millionaires, even if I would not benefit from it personally. So to make their situation worse, yes, even if you don't benefit. Or another question, when I hear about a millionaire who made a risky business decision and lost a lot of money because of it, I think it serves him right. We called it the Schadenfreude. Question. By the way, it's funny. The only country where we had more people who agreed than disagreed was Germany, and where I live. And so maybe this is the reason why the word Schadenfreude is a German word. The last example is I would favor drastically reducing managers' salaries and redistributing the money more evenly among their employees, even if that would mean that the employees would get only a few more dollars per month. And all the statements have in common, and we had dozens of statements, that people want to make situation worse for rich people, even if they don't improve their own situation. And if someone agreed with all this kind of statements or disagreed, then we could distinguish between three different groups. The first group we called the envious, social enviers. The other group we called the non-enviers, and then there were some people in the middle between. We called them the ambivalent. And what we did in the next step, we calculated something that we call the social envy coefficient, and this is the ratio between envious and non-envious people in a country. To make it a little bit easier, maybe the higher the number is, the more envious are the people in a country. And so we saw a lot of differences, especially between people in France. These were the most envious people with a social envy coefficient of 1.21. Then we had Germany with 0.97. And then, this is new, this is not in the book, but it's new, Italy for 0.62. That means people in Italy are not so envious as in Germany or in France. And then we had the United States with 0.42, and we had UK with 0.39. So you see there's a huge contrast between UK on the one hand and France on the other hand.
That surprises me. It surprises me to hear the UK with the lowest number. I'm not surprised that France has the highest number. I expected that. But I would have thought that the United States would be a better place than the UK when it came to that social envy coefficient.
Yes.
Do you know any of the reasons why the UK scored so well?
I can exactly. I expected the same. And the reason is only because young people in the United States are very envious and have very negative attitude toward rich people. If it would be only about older Americans in my age, older than 60, it would be right that United States are much less envious than UK, for example. But with the younger Americans, there's a huge contrast. We have in no other of the European countries this contrast. Maybe I can tell you some numbers, examples for this. For example, we had this so-called zero-sum belief question. The question was, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? The more the rich have, the less there is for the poor. This is what we call zero-sum belief, what all socialists believe in this thing. And on average in the United States, 34% agreed and 40% disagreed. But with younger Americans, 45% agreed, and I compare it with older Americans, only 24% agreed. Older Americans, older than 60, 24%, younger Americans, 45%. Or, for example, we have here a very extreme statement. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Rich people are good at earning money, but they are not usually decent people. And on average in the United States, 27% agreed, but from younger people, younger than 30 years, 40% agreed. And older Americans, older than 60, only 15%. So 15 and 40%. So there's a huge difference. And in Europe, we had not this big difference. And if we had a difference, it was the other way around, that young people were a little bit more positive towards the rich than older people. This is true for UK and for France and for Germany. But now we have new numbers from Italy, and this was very surprising for me. In Italy, it was exactly the opposite from the United States. Older people in Italy are very, very negative towards rich people, and young people are very positive towards rich people. So so you see, it's not only the difference between countries, but it's as well different between age groups. We looked as well for differences with gender or with income groups and so on. But the most important difference was with age groups.
Do you think in the United States that has something to do with recent experience of, for example, Donald Trump? Could that be what's influencing younger people to take a more negative attitude towards wealthy people?
No, I don't think so. There were other polls some years before where we saw that young people are very negative toward capitalism and free market and entrepreneurship. And I'm not 100% sure what is the reason, but I think part of it is that, for example, if someone is 30 years now or 25 years, his earliest experience maybe was the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And, I have another book, I think we talked about it, The Power of Capitalism. And I showed in this book that it was not a crisis of capitalism and that it has nothing to do with neoliberalism or with deregulation. But this is what most people believe, what you can read every day in media and what politicians will tell you. And this was their first experience, that this is a crisis of capitalism, the financial crisis. I think this is one thing. And another thing is, if you look what happens in the universities, I think in Europe as well, we have much more leftist professors at our universities as in the United, as conservative or maybe libertarian professors. But in the United States, it's worse. In some, I think 20 or 30 years ago, the ratio between conservative and leftist professors was like 2 to 3, so 3 leftist, 2 conservative. Today we have a ratio, it is 12 to 1 in the United States. So 12 leftist, and this is in general with all. It's not only for social science. I think if you look at social science, you have almost no conservative people there. And if you look one level below this with assistant professors, you have a ratio of 48 to 1, so 48 left. And this is not only at the universities, it's the same at high school. And so I think even in UK, it better than and I know it from Germany. Of course, we have more leftist attitudes with intellectuals and in the university, but it's not so extreme as it is in the United States.
And you mentioned also the influence of media. And I know the third section of your book looks at how the rich are portrayed in the media. And I particularly enjoyed your analysis of Hollywood movies. One of my favorites in there is The Wolf of Wall Street, which is a very extreme example, isn't it, of a wealthy person, a lawbreaker, a criminal. What perceptions, what portrayals of wealthy people, rich people did you find in these movies?
Yes, I can give you also some numbers, and we used here what we call in prejudice research the so-called stereotype content model. That means that rich people are sometimes portrayed, or minorities in general, as competent, for example, intelligent or industrious on the one hand, but with a negative character, especially morally, with bad moral, bad character. And so we looked how rich people were portrayed in Hollywood movies, and we compared it with this what we called the non-rich counterparts. I give you an example. For example, I think most of you know A Pretty Woman, for example, with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. And Richard Gere has, in the beginning of the film, a very negative character to pry politicians, and very cold like a waiter. And in the end, he was changed due to the positive influence of this prostitute who was, in spite of their profession, portrayed in a morally much more positive way. And so we have in these movies, we have rich people and what we call non-rich counterpart. And in the beginning of the film, it was so we analyzed more than 500 movies, but then we had a more in-depth analysis of 43 movies. And this 43 movies, 31 of the rich characters were portrayed in a negative way and only 9 in a positive way. And if you compare it now with this, what we called the non-rich counterpart characters, 24 were portrayed as competent and positive character, and only 10 were portrayed as incompetent and positive character, and only 6 with a negative character. So, and if you analyze, sometimes it changes during the movie. In the end, you have sometimes, as I mentioned with Pretty Woman as an example, that something's changing. But if you look how rich people are portrayed in the end of each film, it's as well that there are much more rich people who are portrayed in a negative way, with a negative character. If you compare it with this, what we call the non-rich counterpart, most of them are portrayed in a positive way. So this was the result of our analysis of this Hollywood movies.
So rather than the rich character receiving redemption by the end of the movie, they actually continue on that arc of being portrayed in a negative fashion. And of course, the media, the movies we watch, the newspapers we read, the magazines and books we read, have a very powerful impression on our stereotypes and what we think about people.
Yes, this is true. I can tell you a funny story. I had an interview with a journalist here in Germany, and he was very left-sided, but in a way, I think he liked me and I liked him. And in the end of the interview, he asked me, please be honest for a moment. It was about super rich people. I think super rich people are, if you are honest, exactly how we know them from James Bond movies. They want to rule the world. And so isn't it true, if you're honest? And then I asked him another question. I asked him, how many super rich people do you know in person? And he admitted that he knows even not a millionaire and no multimillionaire, no billionaire, no one. And then I told him, okay, you see, this is the difference between you and me. I wrote my second doctoral dissertation about the psychology of super rich people, and I had interviews with 45 super rich people, and I know much more than this 45 people. And this is the difference. And this is maybe another very interesting result I have to tell you from our study. First, we asked the population in general what they think about the personality traits of rich people. And then in the next step, we asked only these group who answered the question, do you know at least one millionaire in person? Yes, because most of the people, they answered that they know, or they think that they know not only one millionaire in person. And then we compared the results, and I give you this was very, very interesting. I will give you some.
Because Rainer, this is about perception versus reality.
Here's the result. Here are the results, for example, for Germany, but we had the same results now for Italy. When we asked the population as a whole, which, if any of the following are most likely to apply to rich people, and we gave them a list with personality traits, then 62% said self-centered, 56% materialistic, 50% ruthless, 49% greedy, and 43% arrogant. Only after this, negative traits, some other positive traits as intelligence and so were mentioned. This was when we asked the population as a whole. And then we asked only those respondents who said that they know at least one millionaire. And then we asked them the same question, which, if any of the following, are most likely to apply to the millionaire you know best? And they answered 71% industrious, 71% intelligent, 58% imaginative, 47% optimistic, and 45% visionary and farsighted. And we know this from other minority groups as well. Sometimes that people who have close contact with these minority groups, that they have much more differentiate, that they think different as someone who know minorities only from media.
So the answer to this challenge of negative stereotypes about rich people seems to be, we need to get to know rich people in person, so we can move away from perceptions formed by the media, formed by academia, and we can have real life experience of the quality traits of a rich person.
Yes, absolutely. And for example, one idea, I'm skeptical whether you can realize this idea, but this what I would like to see, that you have every week one entrepreneur, self-made entrepreneur, to tell people in school about their experience, and in university how they founded their company, how they became self-employed, to tell them their story. Because I think sometimes people tell me we should teach the students, or we should teach at even in school more about economy. But I'm a little bit skeptical. If we would have more lessons about economy, I think teachers would tell them how bad capitalism is, what they tell today, and a teacher, what can he tell you about entrepreneurship? His own life story was to go in school, then to study, and then to go back at school. He can tell you nothing about what it means to be an entrepreneur. But if you have if you would have entrepreneurs to go to school and tell their story, how they found their company, and so I think this would be very motivating maybe for a lot of young people, and maybe it would change their view about rich people and capitalists, because what we know from academic wealth research is that most rich people became rich as entrepreneurs. This is something that people forget sometimes. I had another interview some weeks ago, and someone asked me, do we even need super rich people? And I gave also a question back and asked him, do we need successful entrepreneurs? Because this is the same question. Some days ago, the latest ranking from Bloomberg about the richest people in the world was published. And for example, if you look at the top 10, 8 out of this top 10 are self-made entrepreneurs. On the top, Jeff Bezos with Amazon, and now it's Elon Musk with Tesla, or Bill Gates with Microsoft, or Larry Page and Sergey Brin with Google, or Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, and so on. And these are all entrepreneurs. And if someone asks me whether we need super rich people, I ask them whether we need successful entrepreneurs, because and there are so many wrong ideas about this. For example, sometimes I hear that people tell me maybe in the past it was possible to become rich, self-made, but today it's all in inheritance, and it's not in the good old times. It was possible maybe in the 50s, but not today. This is totally wrong. For example, every year Forbes, the magazine Forbes, publishes another list of 400 richest Americans, and they analyzed 1984 the ratio between self-made and silver spoon. And at this time, 48% were self-made and a little bit more were silver spoon. And then they did the same research in 2018, 2 years ago, and 67% were self-made now. So it's exactly the opposite what people think. It's easier today to become rich. Even you see it with the internet. You have a lot of people. There are so many new opportunities. But to come back to your question, yes, it's absolutely right. To do something against this prejudice, this would be a good idea to send entrepreneurs at school. But I have another thing what is very important for me. Rich people should learn from other minority groups to stand their ground. For example, if you compare the situation of gay people 50 years ago and now, 50 years ago, you had so much prejudice, negative prejudice against gay people. And today, I think in Germany and as well UK and United States, it's not a problem. Even we had here the mayor in Berlin for a lot of years, or our foreign minister who was gay, and even he gave a statement, I'm gay and I'm proud of being gay, and so you can't imagine this 50 years ago, something like this. But this came only because this minority groups, they learned to fight for their rights. And this is the difference to rich people. They are very silent, usually. They don't take part on this discussion, and maybe because they have fear that to show themselves, and they have fear maybe because there is so much envy against them. But I think they should do more. And I give you an example. This book that I wrote, it cost a lot of money. All this research, this polls, and for the media analysis, I also commissioned another institute for media content analysis. And this was something about 140,000 euro. And now I spend some more money for the Poles in Italy and Spain and the other. And so this is a lot of money. So for me, I could afford it because I'm a multimillionaire myself, but this is not typical for a researcher. And if I had the idea to establish maybe something like an institute for academic wealth research on university, but I found no rich people who wanted to support it with money. So I had to spend this all this with my own money. But this is I'm a very rare exception of a scientist who's rich at the same time, because most scientists in social science and in other science as well, these are not rich people who can finance such a study.
Rainer, I hope this research makes a positive impact in the world. I'm sure it will do, especially as it expands into other countries and the word gets out there about some of these findings, because it is so important. And I suspect some people listening to our conversation will view it as perhaps trivial, particularly if they are envious, if they fall into that category. But I think it is a stereotype, it is a prejudice, and it's something that should be well addressed. So thank you for bringing it to the world, and thank you for bringing it to this podcast as well and sharing these findings with our listeners. It's a fascinating subject.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you very much that you gave me the opportunity to speak something about my results.